Okay, it's 1 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. The proceedings of this meeting will be recorded and made available on the internet. And we can move on to item 1.2 of our agenda, which is roll call. And I'll ask our clerk, Jesse Clark, to please conduct the roll.
Thank you. Mayor Lamstead, are you present?
I am present.
Deputy Mayor Armstrong?
Present.
Councillor Franzen?
Present.
Councillor Braybrook?
Present.
Councillor Cadigan?
Present.
For staff, we have Donna Taggart, CIO Treasurer.
Present.
Evan Grieger, Director of Public Works.
Present.
Barb Waldron, Director of Building and Planning, CBO.
Present.
Adele Arbor, Planner.
Present.
Bianca Dragicevic, Deputy Clerk.
Present.
Derek Bertram, Planning Technician.
Present.
And Jesse Clark, Director of Corporate Services, Clerk, is present.
Okay, thank you, Jesse Clark. We will move on to item 1.3 of our agenda, which is land acknowledgement and moment of reflection. We respectfully acknowledge that Trent Lakes and Peterborough County are located on the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaty First Nation, which include Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Brahma, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. Trent Lakes respectfully acknowledges that the Williams Treaty First Nations are the stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. We will now take a moment to reflect on these principles and our duties and responsibilities as members of council. Okay, thank you very much. We can move on to item 2 of our agenda, which is disclosure of pecuniary interest. Does any member of council have a pecuniary interest? Please disclose it now or anytime during the meeting prior to speaking on the item you have a pecuniary interest in. I see Councillor Franzen. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to disclose it now. It's 10.51 under finance. It's dealing with Alpine Village and Buckhorn water systems.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Franzen. Any other pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we can move on to item 3 of our agenda, is the approval of the agenda is circulated. I'll entertain a motion to proceed. I see Councillor Cadigan for a mover and Councillor Braybrook for a seconder. Any conversation about the agenda is circulated? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We can move on to item 4 of our agenda, which is adoptions of minutes. We have item 4.1, which is our regular council meeting of February 18th. Councillor Franzen for a mover, Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a seconder. Any conversation about our meeting? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We can move on now to item 5 of our agenda, which is committees and boards. Item 5.1 is liaison reports for council boards and committees. Does anyone have anything to report? I'm seeing none. We can move on to item 6 of our agenda, which is our statutory public meeting pursuant to the Planning Act. I would entertain a motion to suspend our regular council meeting and go into an open meeting for that purpose. See Deputy Mayor Armstrong for the mover and Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. We are now in an open meeting. And we can move on to Derek Bertram, our planning technician. I think you have a preamble.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lamstead, this is a public meeting under Section 34 of the Planning Act to consider an amendment to the municipality's comprehensive zoning bylaw, B 2014-070 as amended. A notice of public meeting for today's application containing the prescribed information was circulated to all landowners within a 120-meter radius of the subject lands at least 20 days prior to this meeting, and a sign was posted on the subject lands in accordance with the Planning Act. The notice was also mailed to all prescribed agencies, public bodies, and persons in accordance with the regulations. Anyone wanting to be notified of any decisions from today's public meeting must inform either myself or the clerk, and the notice of passing will be mailed out to them, setting out the method and manner in which appeals can be made to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If a person does not send a written comment prior to the passing of the bylaw or make an oral submission at the public meeting, that person may not be entitled to appeal the decision.
Okay, thank you very much, Derek Bertram. We can move on to item 6.1 of that section of our agenda. If you would please introduce the file.
Excellent. On today's agenda, we have zoning bylaw amendment 2431 submitted by agent Christine Lawrence of Silverstone Architectural Design on behalf of owners Anthony and Janice Pavicic for the property known as 23 Fire Route 41. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone the property from shoreline residential private access to a shoreline residential private access zone with an exception to permit the construction of 2 additions to an existing single detached dwelling in the water yard and relocate an existing shed outside of the water yard. Planning memorandum from the municipality's external planner is on today's agenda, which has outlined the proposal and made recommendations for the required items to bring back a bylaw before council for approval. Staff have received 3 comments in support from neighboring property owners for the proposed amendment. Comments have been received by the municipality's deputy chief building official, who has stated that a replacement septic system will be required for the proposed additions. And further comments have also been received from the Corthor Pine Ridge District School Board with no concerns. And additional comment has been received from the agent at 12:24 p.m. today, which I'll read aloud before council. Hi, Derek. I'm reading this through the staff report for council, and I'm disappointed at the lack of accuracy concerning the shoreline restoration comments. And it's inaccurate when Mr. Jones states that the following on page 5 under shoreline restoration, we were not told a shoreline restoration plan was required at the pre-consultation stage. I were not told that we could submit our own plan, and we were definitely not informed that approval of the zoning bylaw amendment would be contingent upon implementation of shoreline naturalization. And we were not told that the implementation would be required through the conveyance of a site plan agreement. The entire write-up under the shoreline restoration is not truthful, and I take issue with it. It appears to make the owners and myself negligent, and that is not the case. We have worked very hard to comply with the zoning bylaws, policies, regulations, and codes in place, including archaeological assessment, everything asked for in the formal pre-consultation meeting and follow-up letter received by the town on September 23rd, 2024. This is a substantial request, which can easily be upward of $30,000. The example plans and reports conducted by an environmental firm and by a senior ecologist. Not only would this be very costly, it would add much time to finalizing the zoning bylaw amendment. If this has to go into a site plan agreement as attached and as an attached schedule. Mr. Jones has not been transparent or forthcoming with this information that would be vital to the future of the project. Derek, you have been great to work with, and I thank you for your time and effort. It must be difficult. I won't read that in. And I'm not sure if it is a town policy to not allow direct contact with the planning firm that is outsourced by the municipality, but it has made the application difficult. Lastly, I'm not sure if it's due to the planner not being a direct municipal employee, but I've never been told in a staff report to council that a recommendation in an area that is not governed by some form of legislation, bylaw, policy, environmental protection, natural heritage, etc., be carried out, or the planner would not support the proposal. This is very serious language. If there is a direct policy that I'm not aware of, please correct me. However, to me, this appears to be an overreach and a request for it was not carried out in good taste or tactfully. It is a very costly recommendation that came at the 11th hour in a report to council, and I and my client were caught off guard by this. Would you be so kind to share this with planning council? And that concludes the summary of the zoning bylaw amendment 2431, and I now turn the floor back over to you, Mayor Lambshead, to resume the public meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, Derek Bertram. Okay, is there anyone in the gallery that would like to speak for or against this application? That would be me. Please, I'm not sure we can come to a podium here and speak. Sure, come on, here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. My name is Tony Pavasic. I'm the owner of number 23 Fire Route 41. My wife and I purchased the property back in 2015 and plan to retire up here because we've had enough of the city. Because of her cancer that she had a year ago, we'd like to speed up the process. Yesterday in the 11th hour, we were sent some correspondence that was very upsetting. That is why she is not attending this meeting. She actually said we should cut our losses right now and not proceed with what we're proposing. That's why I'm here, because I believe that council and mayor are here to work with the people. So I have spoke to this lovely lady here, Adele, and we are going to come to a agreement regarding the vitalization to the shoreline. We're hoping we can have a site plan for the next meeting, which I believe is March 18th, I believe it is. There's one remaining item that is missing from our archaeologist because he did not do a follow-up with the ministry. We reached out to him in December and January and finally got a hold of him last week. And he has requested the ministry to expedite the information you're requesting. That's why we don't have it present at this time. So I'm hoping everything will be resolved for the next meeting, and I thank you that I'm able to speak.
Okay, thank you very much for coming to the table, Tony. Hey, does anyone else have any comments or questions for Tony or her staff? Okay, is there anyone in the gallery that would like to speak to this application? Go ahead. Adele, would you like to speak?
Through you,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Mayor, yes, I would. I just wanted to follow up with the conversation I had with the property owner prior to the council meeting. And I have not personally been on his property to look at what's actually on the ground, but in our conversation, the property is quite constrained. And I mentioned to the property owner that it's this council's desire, and I'm working actually on a policy for shoreline restoration and how important for our lake properties that shoreline restoration be taken place when there's a development going on. So I suggested that we work together and we will identify what part of the property could be restored to put some restoration on it, not large trees, but some shrubbery to maintain the essence of the shoreline and to protect it. And so I'll bring forward a site plan agreement to the next meeting of council, as well as the zoning bylaw amendment. And we'll work together on doing the terms. And I also will reach out to the ministry to see where the clearance letter is, because that's an important part of the approval for the zoning bylaw amendment.
Okay. Thank you very much, Adele Arbor. Is there anyone online that would like to speak to this application?
I'm seeing no hands.
No hands? Okay, thank you very much. Anyone have any comments or questions? Go ahead, Councilor Graber.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thanks very much, Adele, for speaking with the property owner. I think it's important. I know that we don't have a shoreline restoration policy in place yet. And I look forward to reviewing that draft. And I think it should be, I think a policy should be reasonable and not be weighted disproportionately against property owners and that sort of thing. I mean, there is, I'm assuming, reasonable steps that can be taken to mitigate any sort of issues, shoreline issues and that sort of thing, and still allowing the property owner, the opportunity to develop their property as they wish. And I just reading the report and whatnot, and then the feedback from the property owner. I mean, the $30,000 potential extra cost. I mean, it's, I know I wouldn't be able to afford that and that sort of, so, but I appreciate it. So.
Go ahead, no.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just for clarification, we're not asking the property owner to provide his own study. We will work with him, and between the municipality and the property owner, we will develop something that we could put clauses in the site plan agreement that's mutually agreeable in terms of preservation of the shoreline.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Any other comments or questions? I just have a comment. I mean, it is a very restricted lot, but you're as far away from that waterfront as you can get. And that's something that's appreciated. Most of your development does move away from the water, which is, thank you very much for that. And we are concerned about our waterfronts and our water quality. So it's nice to see that the development is moving away from the water. So that's fine. Okay. Any other comments or questions? No one online yet? Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now I would entertain a motion to reconvene our regular council meeting. Deputy Mayor Armstrong for the mover, Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. We are now back in our regular council meeting, and we can move on to item 7 of our agenda, which is business arising out of a statutory public meeting. And item 7.1, Derek Bertram, our planning technician, would you like to speak to this item?
Excellent. Through you, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was a public meeting held for file 2431. The municipal staff recommended the following: that council receive the report from the planner and for zoning bylaw amendment file number 2431, and further that council support the zoning bylaw amendment file number 2431, and that council direct staff to prepare a bylaw to be brought back forward towards council pending the following items as outlined by staff member Adele Arbor to work with the property owner in site plan agreement, shoreline restoration plan.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone have any comments or questions? I I'm just looking at a picture of that shoreline and I see a whole bunch of round granite rocks laying there that is very natural shoreline for our area. Okay, do you have a comment? Councillor Braver, go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, thanks. So with this recommendation, does it change at all with the 11th hour development, with the conversation between the homeowner and our planner? Does it, and I'm looking at point number 2 specifically, should there be anything added to that to recognize that there's going to be a further follow-up between the planner and the homeowner?
Through
Sorry,
Mr.
go
Mayor,
ahead.
I don't
Reading.
believe there needs to be any amendment. We will bring forward an executed site plan agreement to the next meeting, and we will be working with the property owner.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, any other comments or questions? Is anyone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Franz, go ahead, please.
Make a motion that council receives a report from the planner for zoning bylaw amendment number 24-31. And further, that council support the zoning bylaw amendment file number 2431. And further, that council direct staff to prepare a bylaw to be brought forward for the adoption pending staff's recommendations.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Deputy Mayor Armstrong, seconder. Any further conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay. Thank you very much. We can move, thank you very much, Darren. We can move, and Liddell, we can move on to item 8 of our agenda, which is presentations. We have none. And item 9 is delegations. And item 9.1 is Jeff Cheshire. Would you make your way to the podium, please, so we can hear you online, or if you could, either that or speak up so we can all hear. I think we have to come to the podium. So people on, yeah.
I just wanted to be allowed to speak in case I didn't like something heard.
Okay. Are we okay with what you heard?
So far, yeah.
Okay,
That's
thank,
my stuff, yeah.
okay. Thank you very much. If, this is your opportunity to speak, because once we get back into the regular council meeting, there's no interaction back and forth, so.
I just want to say that this has been an awful long 15 years getting this approval. And I understand why houses cost so much.
Okay,
As far as ever doing any more of this, I think I'm done.
yeah, well, thank you for the many projects that you have completed. Thank you very much, Jeff. Okay. Now we can move on to 9.2 of our agenda, which Gary Juros. Gary, are you online or he's not in the locality?
I am online. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Please speak to your item.
Perfect. So the delegation is about the staff report on short-term rentals and the move to registration. As you're all aware on council and staff, I personally have been involved, as has my association, the Cavendish Community Ratepayers Association, also representing many residents and other associations on the short-term rental project. In fact, we were one of the first working groups back about 4 years ago. And one of the first questions that I asked in that working group is, what is the problem statement? What problem are we trying to address? And we are 4 years later, and there has not been an answer to that question. And so when I look at the staff report, which is to move ahead with the registration, my question again is, what is the problem statement? What are we trying to achieve? I spent more than 4 hours going through all the public meetings, listening to all the comments. The number one issue, if you pare it all down and net it all out, is we are concerned about people who are renting their properties as a business. Because those are the people who do not necessarily take the same kind of care for their neighbors, the neighborhood, and the environment that everybody else does who owns properties up here. Now, granted, there are residents in the municipality who own properties and don't rent them and act like they're Airbnbs. We get that. But that is not the issue we're trying to address. That is not the problem statement. The problem statement is we are trying, well, I don't know what the problem statement is. I've asked, and through the chair, I would ask anybody who's on the working committee. I know Councillor Braybrook and Deputy Mayor Armstrong are on that working group. And through the chair, I would ask, what is the problem statement? Through the chair, I would offer that question to staff to answer as well. What is the problem statement?
Okay, I think we all know what the problem is the issues we have with some short-term rentals that are being abusive of our bylaws. Go ahead, Councillor Braber.
Thank you through Mayor. Thanks very much, Gary, for the question. Just listening to your comments and your conclusion that you came up with, that the main problem that was that we're trying to resolve was basically short-term rentals operating as a business. For me, I don't think that's accurate. Being part of the working group, we met close to 12 occasions, and I obviously sat through all the public consultations, and I've spoken with many residents. When I was campaigning, knocking on close to 1,500 doors, the big issue with the short-term rentals that I heard right from their mouths, the residents' mouths that had issues that were either neighboring properties, was that it was mainly the disruption to their enjoyment of their property. There were a few that did speak to places being run as a business, but that was more of an add-on. Their main issue was the noise and the disruption, they said, and also they're running it as a business. So I see it as two separate entities, but the main reason is, and from what I heard directly from residents, is that it was the disruption and that sort of thing. And also listening to the public meetings, it was weighted almost 50-50. It was like 50, I think 54 or 57% were in favor of licensing. And obviously the remaining were not in favor of it. So the working group made attempts to strike a balance. I mean, we can't keep everybody happy. We can't come up with a rock solid bylaw that's everybody's going to be happy with. So we worked, we were back and forth on the working group as to how do we delineate between the 47% and the 53%. So and this is the product that we came up with, and that's the way I see it, and that's my experience with the working group and personally speaking with the residents.
Okay, through the chair. With all due respect, Councillor Braybrook, that's a lot of words for a problem statement. I heard from the mayor, he said it was the people running it as a business. You said it's a disruption and the people running it through the business. The problem statement should be fairly short to be able to understand what it is that we're going after. So rather than continuing to have that discussion, my point is this: whether you license or whether you create mandatory registration, which is what you're trying to do, my point is, if you can step back and think about, in 10 words or less, what is the problem statement? The only thing you need to do to adjust the short-term rental program so that it addresses the problem statement, which I heard some variations of it, is you need to revise the definition of short-term rental with the 8 red words included in the slide that you're seeing, which is anybody who rents for a period of less than 28 consecutive calendar days with a cumulative number of rental days exceeding 30 days in a calendar year. Why do we want to do that? Because as you went through all the public meetings, all of the councillors saw them, you sat through them all. It was, it was interesting, but it was also painful. The reality is many people responsibly rent their properties a couple of weeks a year to cover their taxes. They're on fixed income. They're retirees. Their properties are worth 10x what they bought them for, if not more. Their taxes are enormous for fixed income retirees. So they rent them for a couple of weeks to family and friends, and there's never any issues. Your registration will require those fixed income people to register because they're going to rent it for 2 weeks a year. Why would you want to take money out of their pockets when they're trying to make money to pay their bills? If you add these 10 red words into your definition, you will be targeting the businesses and the disruptors who are doing Airbnbs and renting their properties on a short-term basis, and you will not be inadvertently penalizing the people who responsibly rent their properties year in and year out and have been doing it for decades without a problem. So my request of council is that one of the councillors make a motion to revise the definition of short-term rental to add those 10 red words in there that will resolve many, many issues with respect to the short-term rental registration program and the entire working project. If I had not been involved in the original working group, I would not be so passionate about this. But I've seen this thing wander around in circles for years. I think we're at a point where we can actually make some positive impact. But as per the definition of the short-term rental, this is not going to address the problem statement.
Okay.
And that is the end of my delegation.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments and questions from council? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Lamb. I have a few summary comments that I would like to make, but I'll defer them until we have the staff report presented.
Okay, thank you very much. I just, something that is, right at the beginning when we embarked on this journey, this was one of the things that all of us decided that we weren't going to penalize the people that rented them once or twice. I know through many different iterations and advice from solicitors and staff reports that we've got to this position, but this was exactly what we were not going to do, and now we're going to do it. Just a comment. Okay, any other comments?
Through the chair, I'd like to ask one more time for one of the councillors to bring forward a motion to revise the definition of the short-term rental to include these words so that we do not penalize the people who rent their properties for a week and have been doing so for decades without incidents, and not penalizing them inadvertently as per your comments, Mayor Lamshead.
Okay, thank you very much for that. This is not the time to make a motion for that, but after the staff report, we will see if there's anyone willing to do so. We thank you very much for your delegation, Gary, and appreciate the comments.
Thank you.
Okay, now we can entertain a motion to receive both the Jeff Cheshire presentation and the Gary Grove presentation. Councillor Cadigan for a mover and Councillor Franzen for a seconder. Any further conversation about those two items? I'm seeing none. We will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you very much, Gary. Okay, we can move on now to item 10 of our agenda, which is staff reports. Item 10.1 is public works. We have none. Item 10.2 is recreation and facilities. We have none. Item 10.3 is fire and emergencies. We have none. And item 10.4 is building and planning. 10.4.1 is Adele Arbor, our planner. Would you like to speak to this item, please?
Thank you. And through you, Mayor Lamshead, this report is an update for council to identify that we do have a zoning bylaw amendment for Granite Ridge Phase 2 in the bylaw portion of today's meeting. And Granite Ridge received draft plan approval on March 17th, 2021. And last year, our council supported a further 3-year extension, and it was granted in March of 2024. So it is on the applicant to clear all 45 conditions, which we are working with our solicitor. We do have a draft subdivision agreement that has been circulated to the applicant and various proponents that have an interest on behalf of the property owner. And the actual zoning bylaw amendment public meeting was held on December 17th, 2019. So we are ready with the M plan that was produced by the surveyor. So we are going forward with the zoning bylaw amendment. It's being recommended that council receive the report from the planner for zoning bylaw amendment file number 2012-16, and further that council support zoning bylaw amendment file number 2012-16. And I apologize, I've been to the dentist and I'm having some difficulty speaking.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You speak more audibly than myself. Thank you very much for that report. Adele, any comments or questions from council? Seeing none, is anyone prepared to make a motion? Is there anyone? Okay, I see Councillor Cadigan.
Make a motion that council receive the report and council support the zoning bylaw amendment file 2012-16.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a seconder. Any further conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Thank you very much. Okay, we can move on now to item 10.4.2 of our agenda, which is Donna Talbot, our CAO treasurer. Would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, and through you. So before you is an update report from the short-term rental working group following direction from council at the November 5th, 2024 regular meeting. At the November meeting, council supported the working group's recommendation for a mandatory registration program for short-term rental accommodations. The direction provided was for the working group to prepare a draft registration bylaw for council consideration, which is on the agenda later today. So under the bylaw, all STRA owners would be required to register with the municipality by submitting a signed application and providing specific information related to the rental property. This application could be submitted electronically or through a paper submission. It should be noted that the bylaw before you today would apply to all short-term rental accommodations that are rented out for any period equal to or less than 28 consecutive days throughout all or any part of the calendar year. Through the transition from a licensing program to a registration program, the working group supported the inclusion of all STRA owners because the program was very much streamlined and for consistency in enforcing the bylaw. All applications received by staff would be reviewed against municipal records to ensure that the capacity of a sewage system supports the dwelling structure and the number of guests being accommodated. If records do not match what is being requested on the application, or if there are no records, the applicant would be required to submit a separate application for a municipal review of the existing sewage system. The fee for this separate review would be $500. Once the septic application is approved, staff would then be able to proceed in processing the STRA registration application. The fee for the initial application would be $350, and there's an annual renewal fee of $250. Once a registration is approved, the owner would be required to agree to the terms and conditions of the registration. The terms and conditions are provided to ensure the safety of guests and help mitigate any potential disturbances to surrounding residents. These include a requirement to have an operable smoke and carbon monoxide detector and fire extinguishers, having potable water, liability insurance, and having a responsible person within 90 minutes available. So having a responsible person who can be on site within 90 minutes allows the municipality to shift complaint resolution to the owner and the responsible person. You will also see an amendment to the AMPS bylaw before you today for approval, which will allow for enforcement of STRAs through administrative penalties, a demerit point system, and possible revocation of a registration if warranted. As a reminder, the suggestion of a registry system and associated bylaw was recommended by the working group after engagement of stakeholders, special interest groups, surrounding municipalities, public consultations, and legal advice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Donna. Anyone have any comments or questions regarding that presentation? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Yeah, thanks, Mary Lamstead. And I'm going to attempt this. My voice is still not steady, but here we go.
Do your best.
Um,
Sure you will.
Can you hear me okay with the mask on? Okay. As a member of the short-term rental working group, my assessment is that this bylaw and the approach it represents is measured, focused, responsive, and responsible. There's not a single detail in this program that has not been discussed, debated, opened up for public input, and benchmarked with other municipalities. Is it perfect? No, but it is a thoroughly and meticulously instructed approach that can be reviewed and assessed once it's implemented. This council approved a deliberate 3-year phased approach to managing the issues that our residents raised with short-term rentals. This third phase was licensing, excuse me, and you'll recall that the working group first proposed a full-blown licensing program with extensive paperwork, mandatory on-site inspections, and a minimum licensing fee of $1,000. That mirrored the vast majority of licensing programs in Ontario. At that time, recognizing the burden that this would impose, we considered carving out an exception for casual renters. Those are the people who rent out 2 or 3 weeks a year, mainly to cover their expenses. And typically are not a problem, but not always. Based on all the public input, 650 web responses and over 50 delegations in 2024, and revisiting the 1,656 people who responded to the survey in 2021, a detailed analysis of the resources required to implement this ambitious licensing program, and a brutally honest relook at what problem we're solving, we pivoted significantly to a lighter approach. Mandatory registration requires only a short application form, an affidavit, and a $350 administrative fee. Since this is a streamlined and simplified process, all STRs will be required to register their properties. Safety and health concerns will be addressed through the questions applicants must answer and affirm. Since septic capacity has been an identified issue, a review of the septic permit compared to advertised guest accommodation will be a part of the application review. And finally, STRs will be required to submit the name and contact information for a responsible contact person who can be on site within 90 minutes in the event of a complaint or a guest issue. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you very much for those comments. I know there's been a lot of effort with this group to come up with something that is usable for many, many areas in our municipality. Any other comments or questions? No, I am going to ask is, go ahead, Councillor Francis.
You can go.
No, go ahead.
No, the only comment I had is after this bylaw is up and running for a year, that it automatically be reviewed by staff and council, just to have that included in the motion, so that whatever glitches are in, there's obviously going to be some, and that we can address as a council.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Got an emotional here. I think Barbara Waldron, our CBO, now I've lost your title again. Isn't that horrible? Please come to the podium and speak.
You got my name right.
Yep, that's part of it.
Through you, Mayor Lamstead, I'd like to address the topic of providing carve-outs for casual renters. I can honestly say that the committee over the past year specifically has worked extremely hard to come together to the point where we are today with the short-term rental bylaw to use registry as the tool of choice. The bylaw before you has been slimmed down dramatically from the licensing approach to the registration approach to be used with AMP's enforcement bylaws. The bylaw presented today is to apply equally across the municipality for the following reasons. For enforcement purposes, having a bylaw that is precise and applies to everyone is much easier for the bylaw to be enforced. Allowing for an exemption to a certain group of people creates more opportunities for municipal staff to be drawn into disputes between neighbors through complaints where one is stating the other is operating a STR. This exemption will result in much more time spent by staff through enforcement. This exemption creates a loophole for anybody to use to get out of complying with the bylaw, which will put staff in the position to do additional work to determine if there's some sort of advertising taking place or tracking complaints coming in on properties to see if there's a consistent pattern. One of the purposes of the registry is to have a contact information for the STR so that when complaints are received, staff or the after-hour agencies can immediately contact that person identified to mitigate the issue as quickly as possible. The cost to operate STR has been reduced significantly to offset costs to operate the program, which is much less of a detriment to STR owners whom typically generate substantial incomes from these operations. The only item that remained in the bylaw that stems from the building code is the requirement to ensure that the septic system is adequate for the rental. As Trent Lakes is cottage country with a large number of lakes, this is a reasonable and environmentally responsible requirement, and no one should have the exemption from that requirement to ensure the environment is being addressed. The committee listened to all the complaints received through the public meetings and through other formats. There was just as many comments that had concerns about all types of STRs, no matter the length of time they're being rented, because they all have the potential to generate complaints. Therefore, registration is the lowest form of enforcement next to doing nothing. It is not onerous, expensive, nor invasive. It is simply a procedure to ensure that we have contact names for all STRs to respond to complaints and to ensure the environment is taken care of. I will close by restating that having one bylaw for the entire municipality with no carve-outs is the simplest and most direct way for my department to enforce and address the issues that did arise from the public meetings. If the municipality decides at a later date to once again reconsider licensing, the matter of carve-outs may be more appropriate at that time. The registry program will also produce data from the first year on the enforcement, the complaints, the number of STRs we actually are going to be dealing with, and in general, how the year went to make future decisions and potential changes to the bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone have any comments or questions for Bart? Seeing none. Thank you very much for your comments. Go ahead, Councillor Franz. Or Councillor Greenbrook, I'm sorry. Looking in there.
If I was only as handsome as. Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I'm interested in Councillor Franzen and Councillor Cadigan's perspective after reviewing the bylaw and what their perspective is.
I support the bylaw with amendment of reviewing it after a year so that we can work out whatever problems we have in the bylaw.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. I look forward to seeing the results. I hope we get the buy-in that I don't think we're going to get. And again, the end of the year review will probably tell us more about that.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your question and comments. Okay, any other comments? Seeing none, is there anyone prepared to make a motion? Seeing none.
I just want to make a comment.
Okay.
I think the motion should come from the working group, from the two members of council that are on the working group, and I would certainly support the motion.
If you choose to make that motion.
I'm happy to make the
Deputy
motion
Mayor,
if my
go
voice holds. I've said, I'll make the motion that council receive the report, that we support the short-term rental accommodations mandatory registration bylaw, that we schedule a one-year review by staff and council to look at the results and possible revisions. And finally, thank the working group and dissolve the committee.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Faber for a second. Any further conversation? in regards to this motion? I think the one-year review is a great idea. That's kind of swaying me a little. So thank you very much for adding that to that motion. Okay. No other comments? I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay. We can move on.
Could I
now
have
to-
a recorded vote, please?
Oh, it was unanimous.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your
Oh,
hand.
sorry, it was unanimous.
Okay, then we don't need it.
If you want, we can still do that.
Yes, let's do that.
Deputy Mayor Armstrong, are you in favor?
Yes.
Councillor Brayber?
Yes.
Councillor Cadigan?
Yes.
Councillor Franzen?
Yes.
Mayor Lamson?
Yes.
That motion is carried.
Okay. Thank you for that. Our clerk, Chelsea Clark, and many other hands. Okay, we can move on to 10.5 of our agenda, which is finance. And 10.5.1 is Donna Taggart, our CAO treasurer. Would you like to speak to this item, please?
Thank
Oh, and I
you.
think
Mayor
Councillor
Lamson.
Franzen, yes, you
Yep.
are declaring conflict of interest before we get started. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you. So before you is a report that is required annually by March 31st under Section 11 and Schedule 22 of the Safe Drinking Water Act 2022. So the report is created by the Ontario Clean Water Agency, Aqua, who are contracted by the municipality to look after their water systems. Aqua are responsible for preparing these reports in order to satisfy the annual requirement. So what we would need today is that council receive the report, direct staff to provide a copy of the 2024 annual reporting to Alpine Village Pirates Glen and Buckhorn Lake Estates Associations, and that council direct staff to post the reports on the municipality's website and have hard copies available at the municipal office at no charge. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Donna Taggart. Does there anyone have any comments or questions? See no comments or questions. Is anyone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Braver, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to receive the report and council direct staff to provide a copy of the 2024 annual water reporting to Alpine Village, Pirates Glen, and Buckhorn Lake Estates Associations. And further, that council direct staff to post the reports on the municipality's website and have hard copies of the reports available at the municipal office at no charge.
Okay, thank you very much. And I have a seconder, which is Councillor Cadigan. Any further conversation? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay, thank you very much, Donna Taggart.
Thank you.
Bianca, thank you. It's time to get a coffee, hasn't it?
Hopefully he didn't go to Tim's.
Hopefully he's bringing 5 back.
I was going to say, if he did, I hope he shares. Thank you, Bianca. Okay, welcome back, Councillor Brandon.
Thank you, Mayor.
We can move on to item 10.6 of our agenda now, which is administration. We have none. 10.7 of our agenda, which is corporate services, and 10.7.1. Bianca Dragicevic, our deputy clerk, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you. Through you, before council are the expenses submitted for the month of January for council's review and authorization. Thank you.
Have a chance to look them over. Is anyone prepared to make a motion or have conversation? Councillor Franzen, go ahead.
Make motion to receive or to accept,
Okay, we're going to approve the,
approve.
yeah, receive and,
Yeah.
okay, authorize, yeah.
Or
Okay, do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Braybrook for a seconder. Any further conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. And I do have my January almost finished. Just a point. Okay, we can move on to item 10.7.2 of our agenda, which is Jesse Clark, our Director of Corporate Services Clerk. Would you like to speak to this item, please?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lambshead. A privacy breach, which is what this report and policy is regarding, is defined as the theft, loss, unauthorized use, disclosure, and/or disposal of personal information or records containing personal information in violation of the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Anytime a privacy breach occurs, attempts should be made to contain the breach, notify the impacted persons and the Information and Privacy Commissioner for major privacy breaches, and an investigation should be performed to determine steps for mitigation and prevention. Currently, there's no legislation requiring a policy for privacy breaches or mandatory reporting, and this policy is a proactive step. The draft policy, which is attached to the report, outlines the procedure to follow when a privacy breach occurs, which will serve to guide the municipality's response to all potential privacy breaches moving forward. The policy outlines the responsibilities of all employees, directors, and members of councils, committees, and boards, as well as additional responsibilities for the clerk and CAO in handling breaches. Staff are recommending council adopt the privacy breach policy as attached to the report.
Okay, thank you very much. Start. Okay, does anyone have any comments or questions for Jesse? Or about this report? Go ahead,
Good
Councilor.
comment.
Yeah.
Reading this, I was thinking, do I understand all the legal ramifications? I don't. Now I can really use training on this subject, so I'm in favor.
Thank you very much for that comment. Councilor Braver, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to receive and that the privacy breach policy attached as Appendix 1 be adopted.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that? Okay, Councilor Cadigan for a seconder. Any further conversation? I just want to make a point that it is fantastic that our staff is being proactive because these kind of breaches are happening all the time and we need to have a way to make sure we can mitigate them when they do happen. So thank you very much for that. Any other comments? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We can move on now to item 10.7.3 of our agenda, and Jesse Clark, our Director of Corporate Services Clerk, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lambshead. The Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act, or AODA, requires municipalities to establish a multi-year accessibility plan and to prepare an annual status report on the progress of measures taken to implement the plan. The Corporate Services Department coordinated an update on the accessibility achievements from all departments from the previous reporting year in accordance with this requirement. The 2024 annual status update, which is attached to the report, highlights the municipality's progress on ongoing and 2024 initiatives, as well as carryovers from the 2023 reporting year. The 2024 annual status update will be posted on the municipality's accessibility webpage.
Okay, thank you very much, Jesse. Does anyone have any comments or questions? I'm seeing none. Is anyone prepared to make a motion?
Motion to receive.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a seconder. Any further conversation? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Thank you very much, Jesse Clark. Okay, we can move on now to item 11 of our agenda, which is correspondence for information. At 11.1 is the Cavendish Culture and Recreation Committee minutes. Would anyone like to speak to this? So prepared to make a motion. Councillor Franzen, go ahead.
Motion to receive.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any further conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We can move on to item 12 of our agenda, which is correspondence for action. We have 3 items there. We can do them all at one time, or we can speak to one individually. Go ahead, Councillor Braver.
I'll make a motion to receive all 3.
Okay. Do I have a second? I'm not sure if I'm allowed to bring one of them out.
You could get a seconder to the motion.
Okay. We have a seconder for that motion to receive all. Councillor Brandon. Okay. Any conversation about the 3 items? I'm just thinking of the support the Canadian and Ontario government's negotiations with the United States government on trade tariffs, but I think we're kind of mute there at the moment. It's happening. That was my comments. Okay. I will call for the vote. Any other conversation about the 3 items? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay, we can move on now to item 13 of our agenda, which is bylaws. Item 13.1, oh, there's 5 bylaws on the agenda. We can speak to any one individual, or we can receive them or approve them all at the same time. It's up to the council's decision. See, Councillor Cadigan, go ahead.
Motion to approve all.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that motion? See Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a seconder. Any further conversation? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Was that your hand up again? I just seen it on the screen.
Yes, no, just once.
Okay, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We can move on to item 14 of our agenda, which is business arising out of a previous meeting. Does anyone have any business arising out of a previous meeting? Seeing none, we can move on now to item 15 of our agenda, which is notice of motion. Does anyone have a notice of motion to bring forward? Seeing none, we can move on to item 16 of our agenda, which is information items. Does anyone have any information items? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mayor Lamson. The Buckhorn Library is, Trent Lakes Library has been holding some coffee and chat sessions. And this Wednesday at 1:30, there's a coffee and chat with the OPP. Detachment Commander Chris Galeazza will be there, as well as Officer Dan Gay, and they will entertain any questions that those attending wish to ask.
Excellent. Very good to have some interaction with our OPB officers.
Yes, and that will be at the Buckhorn Library, sorry.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much. Any other information items? I'm seeing none. We can move on to item 17 of our agenda, which is our closed meeting. I would entertain a motion to go into closed. Councillor Cadigan for a mover. Councillor Franzen for a seconder. Okay, we are going to go into closed session under Ontario Municipal Act, Section 239(2) to discuss C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality, building permit, litigation, or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality building permit. And F, advice that is subject to solicitor client's privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, building permit. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We are now in closed. We can move now to item 17.2 of our agenda, which is rise from closed meeting. I would entertain a motion to rise from the close and go back into our regular meeting. Councillor Brayberg for a mover. Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. We are now back into our regular council meeting. We can move on to item 18 of our agenda, which is business arising of a closed meeting. And item 18.1 is the adoption of the minutes. Would anyone be prepared to make a motion? Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a mover. Councillor Franzen for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We can now move on to item 19 of our agenda, which is the adoption of the confirming bylaw. Item 19.1 is the confirming bylaw. I see Councillor Cadigan for a mover. And Councillor Brayberg for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We have adopted our confirming bylaw. And we can move on now to item 20 of our agenda, which is adjournment. We need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Franzen for a mover, Councillor Brayberg for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We are adjourned. Thank you very much to staff. Thank you very much for anyone who attended. And thank you very much for council.